Now, we've known for a long time that childhood obesity is a big problem in this country and in a lot of different countries as well. But what we're now seeing is completely alarming. In the U.S., the CDC said that the pandemic era increase in childhood obesity rates is, and they use that very word, alarming. How alarming? Let me give you a few statistics here. Children and teens gained weight at a more alarming rate during the pandemic, especially those who were already overweight or obese. Now, the CDC did this study, which analyzed more than 430,000 children ages 2 to 19 years old. And it supports essentially the warning by experts who said that this nationwide closure of schools that we began in 2020 and early child care settings reduced the ability for children to have regular physical activity and access to healthy meals. So what happened was kids weren't in gym class. First of all, I want you to understand, childhood obesity was already a problem before the pandemic. And then you take into account that the physical education classes that children had access to, they no longer have access to it. And the 2 meals that children often get, which in spite of whatever shortcomings they did provide by and large a balanced meal. Now that's out the door and they're free to stay home, not do anything physical and eat Cheetos all day. This is really frightening. This study is the largest tracking to date on the rate of weight gain in children and teens. The average body mass index increase for children and teens approximately doubled between 2018 and 2020. About 22% of children and teens were obese last August. That is up 19% from a year earlier. Children who were a healthy weight were gaining an average of 5.4 pounds a year last year. That is 2 pounds more than before the pandemic. Now, hopefully now that the children are back in school, this all gets somewhat back to normal. But it's not as if all of a sudden kids were fit as a fiddle before the pandemic. There was another concerning report, and I think this is back in September. This was back in September. There was another concerning report that showed the number of states with high obesity rates nearly doubled in 2 years. So you've heard a lot of different federal health officials, politicians, others try to make an issue of childhood obesity and try to say what they're going to do to combat childhood obesity. But clearly, this has been totally ineffective. And I really do think this ought to be a top priority for everybody. The media, public health officials, teachers, physical education and others, school administrators, parents, and yes, even legislators. Now, here is the real problem here. Now, we've known for a while that there's a problem with childhood obesity in this country. And the health issues related to childhood obesity, which often leads to adult obesity, which leads to all sorts of things from diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, you name it, a panoply of long-term health issues which cause people's lives to be cut short, or if their lives are not cut short, to at least reduce the quality of these folks' lives. We are also seeing some warnings by pediatricians that they're equally concerned about the amount of young people with eating disorders. And that problem has also gotten worse during the pandemic. I mean, you think about what's going on now. We are living in the worst of both worlds. I feel like I'm back a week ago where I was saying, how can we be living in a city where everyone wants to move out, everyone's getting shot, and yet it still costs a fortune to live here? We're now also in a situation when it comes to public health where children are both obese and they have eating disorders. I mean, you talk about a catch-22. So, and there are some numbers that I won't get into now that deal with the number of children that have been admitted to hospitals for complications having to do with eating disorders. And again, this is to me exhibit triple Z as to why, if there is a comeback of COVID, or if this avian bird flu turns out to be something big, priority number one for the country should be not locking down. We should absolutely not be closing schools. We need to keep these schools open, and we need to do whatever we can to approximate normal life for people. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics in September recommended that because of the pandemic, pediatricians should assess all children for obesity-related risk factors, provide counseling, and screen for patient and family stress, disordered eating, and social detriments of health. Okay, so that's what the pediatricians recommend. My question for you is, we've seen some countries handle this pretty well. Mexico has made some major progress with respect to obesity. And one of the key things they did there was, believe it or not, they used a tax on sugar. And that tax on sugar did help a great deal. Now we're seeing the same thing going on in England. A new report from England's National Health Department found unprecedented increases in childhood obesity from 2020 to 2021, the steepest increase ever reported. And a lot of people are wondering if American youth is going to be following in that footsteps as well. The steepest increase ever reported. So far, it doesn't look like it's as much of an uptick in 1 year as Great Britain was dealing with, but it's still an increase in childhood obesity rates that the CDC has called, and these are their words, alarming. So my twofold question for you is this. At 1-800-848-WABC. That's 1-800-848-9222. Now that the kids are back in school, now that life's pretty much back to normal, do you think we'll see childhood obesity come down to a pretty a normal rate again? That's question one. Number two is, what do you do about this? What do you do about a world where there are dual concerns regarding both childhood obesity and eating disorders? I'll tell you one of the things that I think a lot of it comes down to the story that we did yesterday about children watching videos all day on their mobile phones, and they're addicted to their screens. When, I don't know about you, but when I was a child, that wasn't even a thought. That we did have video games, but our primary means of recreation, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, was to go outside and play. You play basketball, you play hockey, you play baseball, you play stickball, wiffle ball, football, whatever. And you'd at least get some exercise, or just tag as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. There are all sorts of different varieties of tag. There's good old-fashioned tag, there's freeze tag, all sorts of different types of tag. And I think that spirit is, I don't want to say it's lost among this generation of young people, because I see kids playing outside in my neighborhood, but I will see it is diminished among the current generation of young people. Additionally, I would also add that I think a big part of the problem is not just that children aren't exercising, which I do think is part of the problem, but I think a big part of the problem here is that what's in children's food is making them fat. And what's in adults' food is making them fat. Do you ever look at the label of what's in your food? One of the things that you will find in almost every type of food that you have, you can go ahead and look through your cabinets now and see if this is true, is high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup, I'm not going to get into a whole corn syrup discussion now, but there's a wonderful documentary on this. I think it's on Netflix. It's called King Corn. and it's really creatively done. In fact, I'm going to try and get the filmmakers of that documentary on. It's a few years old now, but it's still more relevant with these childhood obesity numbers. It's more relevant now than ever. But years ago, if you were to go and get something sweet, do you know what would be in it? Sugar. Now, sugar wasn't great for you, but it was nowhere near as detrimental to your health as high fructose corn syrup. Why? Ask yourself the question, why is high fructose corn syrup in everything? High fructose corn syrup, and again, I'm not a nutritionist, not a scientist, but high fructose corn syrup, it's almost like eating the artificial sweeteners that everybody wants to avoid eating because they're so detrimental to your health, at least according to some experts. But it also makes you fat. It's really a horrible thing for you. So why is it in everything? It's banned in some other countries. Why is it in everything here? The reason it's in everything here is because farmers in this country get paid a boatload of money to grow corn. The government subsidizes corn growth, and that leads to corn grown for ethanol, and it leads to corn grown for high fructose corn syrup. If you watch this documentary, King Corn, these guys, it's a really cleverly made documentary, but these guys decide to make some of their own corn and go through the whole process from, growing it to the subsidies. And what they do is they pick an ear of corn after they finish growing it, and they take a bite of it. It's almost unedible. Almost unedible. You might think, well, why? Why are they growing all this corn if you can't even eat it? Well, it's used for feed for farm animals. It's used for ethanol. And yes, it's used for high fructose corn syrup. And the only way these corn farmers are able to make a profit is because of the subsidies that the government is giving them. So think of how crazy this is. Because if you're on the lower socioeconomic end of things, and you don't make a lot of money, and let's face it, one of the unfortunate realities of American life today is that a lot of minorities tend to be in a worse place financially than a lot of whites. So the government is paying to make you sick with all sorts of lifestyle diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, everything I mentioned earlier. And then that's on the front end. And then on the back end, the people that get fattest and sickest are the poor. The poor. Because they can't afford the options of other people, maybe. And so then if they're on Medicaid, which you qualify for if you don't make a lot of money, the government is then paying to treat you. So the taxpayers are screwed 6 ways from Sunday. They get screwed by paying to make people fat and sick to begin with, and then they get paid. They get screwed by paying to treat them on the back end. Does that system make any sense to you? So 800-848-WABC. That's 1-800-848-9222. We have 2 reports of childhood obesity growing to very concerning levels. One has to do with children in America. One has to do with children in England. My question for you is, what do you do about this? Especially considering that pediatricians are also warning about eating disorders. 800-848-9222. Let me begin with Mary Beth on Long Island. Hello, Mary Beth.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks, Mary Beth.
Yes, economic issues do play a part in this. And I find it very interesting that when you go into a 7-Eleven store, right now they have on their windows, at least here on Long Island, signs announcing that they take, food stamps, EBT cards, and it says to buy healthy food. What is there that's healthy to buy in 7-Eleven? That's one thing.
Right.
The other thing is, I don't think families don't eat together dinner anymore around a table. People are very busy. They're not preparing good food at night. So it's just become impossible for many people to eat well and to eat together. And when people eat meals together, I think they're healthier.
Oh, I would agree. Look, I still think high fructose corn syrup is a problem, but that's a great point, Mary Beth. You're probably less likely to be eating Doritos and these horrible chips if you're surrounded by a family dinner. And the family dinner also deals with all sorts of other problems, social problems that are not necessarily physical, but look, I'm a big advocate of family dinners. I just got an email here from a doctor who says, I'm a liver expert in Texas, and he says they're drowning with obesity and the development of fatty liver and cirrhosis. It's killing them. Who's commenting on this? No one. That's exactly the problem. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Love exploring the world of extraterrestrials, the world of space, and the like. And I was very interested in this article in Politico that came out a day and a half ago. Headline, "The UFO briefings on Capitol Hill have begun. Lawmakers aren't impressed." And in spite of the fact that this is a pretty big story, at least I think it is, and what's contained in it is pretty interesting, and in spite of the fact that even a website like the Drudge Report, which very often sets the tone for the rest of the media, the rest of the news media's coverage of this stuff, even though that's the case, we saw very little coverage of this anywhere else because everyone seems to be focused on the primaries, on this leak coming out of the Supreme Court, and what's happening with with the Ukraine-Russia war. I get all that, but this is an important story, and I can't think of a better person to turn to on this than Stephen Bassett. Stephen Bassett is the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group and a leading advocate for ending the 65-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding extraterrestrials. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us again on the radio.
Yes, Frank. It's good to be with you.
Stephen, in a nutshell, for people that haven't heard our prior conversations, what exactly is the Paradigm Research Group? What do you guys do?
I set it up in '96 to work to resolve the UAP issue by political means. In other words, it was a political problem, not a science problem. The ET presence had been proven scientifically or intellectually way before 1996. The problem was the government politically made a decision to embargo this confirmation, this truth from the American people for national security reasons. And unless we solved the political problem, we were just going to go round and round and round indefinitely, and I had no desire to do that.
What is the new UAP protocol that Congress and passed and the president signed as part of the National Defense Authorization Act? By the way, for people that don't know, UAPs is what we now use to refer to what we used to call UFOs. But go ahead.
And more people are using UAP, and the reason is that for journalists and politicians and former national security people like former CIA directors to talk publicly about this issue, UAP, it means exactly the same thing, but it doesn't carry the 70 years of baggage that is accumulated around the term UFO due to the truth embargo the government's imposed. So it's a language issue, and it's also a credibility issue. It's just more comfortable to say UAP, and that's why we're doing that, and they are using that, and you're seeing it turn up in articles. Look, a lot has happened since 2017. Extraordinary things have taken place, unprecedented, regarding the UAP issue. For those that started just paying attention in 2017 because they saw the New York Times articles, might think that, well, the last 4 or 5 years is pretty much the way it's been. It's normal. It's not. To those of us that have followed the issue for a very long time and know the history going back even before we got involved, what's happening is anything but normal. we're in a whole different place. I like to say we crossed the Rubicon on the issue. So in 2017, when the articles came out of the New York Times, the To the Stars Academy was launched, and ultimately two key people, Louis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, began working not only Congress but also vetting witnesses. This issue started moving forward at a very rapid pace with the potential to resolve itself pretty quickly. And that's good. But unfortunately, history doesn't care. History is many things happening all the time, and things can get very interesting, as the Chinese curse has often been referred to. So in those 5 years, we've had political chaos. We've had hyper-partisanship. We've had the worst pandemic in human history. We've had the most dangerous war in Europe since 1945, with a clear possibility of launching a nuclear war. And now we have a massive social issue that's just instantly emerged. It emerged today regarding Roe v. Wade. So the UAP issue has lost most of its coverage, and I follow it constantly. It's way back down, but it hasn't gone away. It's alive and well on the internet, social media, Facebook, Twitter. It's everywhere.
Radio
Podcasts,
shows like this one, too.
And radio shows like this. So it's alive. But in terms of being a heavy focus in the media, no, they're dealing with these other things. I don't blame them. And as for the Congress, by and large, they've had to step back, all right, members of Congress, because when you've got a war in Ukraine, when you've got people still dying from COVID, you got to be careful how much you want to invest in an issue as controversial as UAP, all right? But nevertheless, there's been things going on. And one of the things that has ensured this is never going to return to where it was is that it got into law. In other words, Chris Mellon and others were successful in convincing by briefing them. I mean, many people were briefed on the Hill by Chris Mellon, and witnesses came up and spoke to them. So ultimately, Rubio made a move and put language into a Defense Authorization Act. The next year, Gillibrand, these are senators, put language in a Defense Authorization Act, setting up these entities at the DoD and what have you, which were given tasks to report and do this and what have you. There's a lot there. It's far more than we could discuss. But what I'm trying to say is that finally, after all these years since Roswell, starting in 2020, this issue went front and political, with high-level political people involved, making statements to the public, with the DoD having to interact, engagements, all kinds of things were happening, which is what we should have had happen in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, or the 80s. But the truth embargo said, no, you can't do that. And so this is an extraordinary time, and the occasional articles that turn up are about how things are going with respect to this process. Now, in terms of the Congress and the Department of Defense working out how they go forward, it's really complicated. All right. Now you're talking about the fate of politicians, the fate of political parties, also the careers of high-level people in the Department of Defense. There is a huge amount of baggage attached to this that has to be dealt with. So this is not simple, but yet it is moving forward. All right. Now, what's happened just in the last couple of days, and again, there's been so many days like this, is one, some interviews, Politico interviewed some politicians to get their impressions of the recent report, because part of the legislation that was passed required the entity that was set up within the DoD to give some briefings on a periodic basis to the members of Congress, key members of Congress, and on certain committees.
Right, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And
I believe also House Intel and Armed Services. And so they did. Well, some of the members thought it was a little lukewarm, okay? Now, let's examine that for a second. This issue is incredibly complicated and controversial. It's been shunned and embargoed for years. And so in another time, any member of Congress, their attitude would be, fine, drag your feet all you want, no big deal. Yeah, you're doing your thing. I don't get out ahead of this. But that isn't where we are now. So what's important here is not what the DOD is not doing that they think they should be doing. What is important is they actually publicly stated that they're not doing enough. And so literally, I mean, if you know...
When you say they publicly stated, are you talking about the senators or the Pentagon?
The members of Congress,
right.
yes.
Okay.
The members of Congress, the senators, and also I think some of the House people basically said they're not doing enough. I mean, again, this is extraordinary. And it shows where we are now. And so that's what's important. They're literally saying that, look, this issue is not only important, but I'm investing some political capital in it. I'm banking that this is actually going to help me in terms of future elections in my position here. And when you get politicians in a position where they think that pressing an issue is going to help get them elected, you're going to see some serious progress. So that has taken place, and it was reflected in that Politico article. We've heard some similar things. Politico, by the way, has a record of being ahead on this issue. They've done a lot of stuff on it. Hell, they've interviewed me several times. I've been in a number of Politico articles. They really have nothing to be anything but be proud of how they've covered this issue. So this is important. But let me tell you about something that happened yesterday that's even more important. All right. There is a news website called News Nation. It's relatively new, but it seems to be substantially funded.
Right, and we've had there's a network too, and we've had one of their anchors, Ashley Banfield, on this program as well.
Okay. Yes. So this is a substantial entity. It's very much right of center. All right. And interesting enough, the right of center or right of center news outlets, by and large, have been more aggressive and out in front on this issue than the left of center. In other words, CNN and MSNBC are really dragging behind Fox and News Nation, even the Daily Caller. It's interesting. Why the left is slow on this issue is not clear to me, but I'm thinking and watching, and may have come up with some thoughts on that. So anyway, what happened is that on the show, this is let me see which one. The show is called On Balance, and it's with Leland Billard. All right. And so he interviewed yesterday one of the members of Congress that has spoken to this issue, and I'm referring to Tim Burchett. Now, Tim Burchett is a Republican congressman from Tennessee. He's conservative, down-home kind of guy, just like you'd expect from Tennessee. Got a classic Tennessee drawl. But he has been in this issue early. And remember, things started out in the Senate. It was like the big shots. Rubio and Gillibrand were getting a lot of heavy action. And he's down there in the House, along with Gallego, by the way. And they're thinking, gee, why are you guys getting all the action here? Why are you getting all the attention? I mean, we're going to speak up, too. And so Ruben Gallego spoke up, and so did Tim Burchett. Now, he's interviewed yesterday. And I wish I had the means to just play it so you could listen to it. But if you go to newsnationnow.com, and you go to the shows, and you can then check out On Balance, and it's like 4 back, and you can go see it. It's from yesterday, and you can watch the interview. There's this key. It starts at 1:58, and what happens is that Billard says to him, he asked the question that hell I was asking people 25 years ago. But here it is on a major show, and he's asking this question. He says, it seems to me there's only one of 3 possibilities. Either this technology is ours, right, advanced technology that has not been divulged to the public and they're testing it and it's being seen, or it belongs to a foreign nation and they're out there testing it or using it and we're picking it up, or it is from intelligence or entities outside of the United States. It needs to be one of those 3. And Burchett responds it, and he says, what do you think? And Burchett says, number 3.
So
now let me be clear. At that moment, Tim Burchett went right to the point. I say point to the front, up front, right? He got out in front of this issue, ahead of Gallego, ahead of Gillibrand, and ahead of Rubio. To my knowledge, he is the only sitting member of Congress, going as back as far as you want to go, that has gone that far. Not Stephen Schiff, not Hillary Clinton, not Gallego or Rubin or Gillibrand, or Reagan, Obama. Nope, none have gone that far. He said matter-of-factly, I believe it is extraterrestrial. So I invite people to watch that interview. Then he goes on, and he gets asked some other questions, and he starts talking about how the government has been running a cover-up. He uses the term cover-up. Now, as you may know, I don't like the term cover-up. I came up with a term called truth embargo back about 2001, which I think is more appropriate and it's more accurate than cover-up. But in any event, he's referring to that. He says the government is part of the cover-up, and they're not going to disclose it to us because they don't trust us with having enough sense to diagnose. It's very frustrating.
Something very interesting happened over the course of the last 10 years. We saw a movement away from martinis and away from beer, which was very popular 20 years ago, more towards old-fashioned drinks. Yes, including the old-fashioned. We saw a movement towards spirits, darker spirits, things like Manhattans, things like old-fashions, things like bourbon neat. You know, it's funny, and I don't know necessarily why I started drinking whiskeys, but I did start maybe about 10 years ago. Before that, people would say, oh, yeah, you got to try this Macallan 18. You got to try this Johnny Walker Blue. And I would say, no, don't waste it on me. I won't appreciate it enough to pay the extra money. I don't want it. Give it to somebody who will appreciate it. Now, what I wouldn't give for a glass of Johnny Walker Blue. But according to Brian Flandern, this is what's driving the martini craze in New York. Not only are cocktails in general coming back into fashion through shows like Mad Men, but here's what's interesting. You're seeing all this content on social media like TikTok and YouTube, but you're also seeing that these martinis taste phenomenal. At the Penrose, and this is, I'm reading from an article on Channel 5's website. At the Penrose on the Upper East Side, you can order a traditional martini or one with a signature twist like the pickle martini. I've had a pickle martini, not crazy about it. You know, the only time I got really wacky with martini ingredients was I was in Las Vegas and I was having martinis with Oscar Goodman, the former mayor and the current first man there, who we're overdue to have back on this show, by the way. I'm not sure whether we should have it on this show or the Mafia podcast. Maybe we'll do both. But he has a restaurant out there, and he has the Oscar martini. He has it with jalapenos. So whenever I'd have martinis with him, just to kind of go along with the moment, I will have it with jalapenos. But I wasn't crazy about the pickle martini. I tried it last Easter. Wasn't crazy about it. So according to Van Flandern, the key to a great tasting cocktail is you shouldn't wince. And a great, well-balanced martini is oily, it's creamy, and it's absolutely delicious. He says, if you're new to martinis, try starting with vodka. I don't agree with that, by the way. As the original martinis were 50% gin and 50% vermouth, which can be very bitter if not stored properly. First of all, I never do 50% vermouth. If I'm making a martini for myself or a friend, unless they specify otherwise that they want it dirty or they want it this, what I'll do is while I'm chilling the glass, I'll put the martini glass in my freezer for a few minutes to chill, and I'll fill it with ice so it gets even colder, and then I'll throw the vermouth in the glass. Just fill the glass with vermouth while it's chilling. And then I'll either, shake or stir the Bombay Sapphire gin to chill it. And then I'll dump the vermouth out of the glass along with the ice and fill it with gin and then put either the olives or the lemon in there. That's the way I do it. I know technically it's an in-and-out martini. Otherwise, they have too much vermouth in them. Otherwise, if you're not going to do that, I give it like a whisper of vermouth. Just teardrops. Just enough to offset the taste so it's not just pure gin. That's my style. But I'd be curious as to what you think is responsible for the comeback of the martini. What do you think it's all about, Alfie? 800-848-WABC. Grub Street has an article, Wellness is Dead, Long Live the Martini. I watch these kids hammering martinis, and I'm like, good Lord. That's by Emily Sundberg. Now, she has a lot of interesting observations about why martinis are, about how martinis are making such a comeback, but not necessarily a lot of observations or a lot of analysis as to why they're making a comeback. So if you have a thought as to why the martini is making a comeback, give me a call. 800-848-WABC. That's 800-848-9222. Last year, there were a whole bunch of articles written about how specifically the espresso martini was making a comeback. Hollywood Reporter did an article on New Year's Eve last year, looking back on the espresso martini's comeback year. Yahoo Finance 3 weeks ago. Headline, Espresso martinis seeing a real resurgence. That's according to a CEO of a liquor company. So I'm curious as to what you think is the reason for this. 800-848-WABC. That's 800-848-9222. Is it YouTube? Is it TikTok? Is it something else? I am, by the way, as you know, on a one-man mission to bring back terrestrial radio. And when I say terrestrial radio, I don't mean this kind of programming, you listening to it on a smartphone or something else. I want to go out in the streets and see radios, and more radios. And I think the key to that, as I've said before, is getting millennials and Generation Zers to embrace terrestrial radios and to maybe they're going to have to start posting about it on TikTok. We got to find some. You know, my friend Jill Flipper, who used to produce the Bernie and Sid show, she's a big TikTok social media influencer, and she no-showed my son's christening on Sunday, last minute, as my wife and I just both predicted that she would. So I feel like she owes me one. I'm going to use my chit to cash in by getting her to do some TikTok videos singing the praises of terrestrial radio. TikTok. We'll see. 800-848-9222. What's responsible for the martini comeback? Rick in New Jersey. Hello, Rick.
Good morning, Frank.
Morning.
I think it's just because it's a good drink and it's being not invented, but what's the word I'm looking for? It's being found out again. You know, I mean, after 20 years of this new generation drinking all the fruity juice drinks and all that, once they try something like gin or real booze, they go, wow, this is why they were, why it became famous in the beginning. But you once told me about the vermouth, that Churchill's method was to fill a bottle of olives up with vermouth.
Yes.
And then the amount of vermouth on the olives was just enough.
That's right.
I saw in Hawaiian Eye, the old show Hawaiian Eye. I saw them the other day making martinis, and the guy had an atomizer, that you spray, women spray perfume on.
Right.
He was spraying vermouth into the martinis with that. And I said, that's brilliant. It's like misting it.
Yeah, I used to hang out. I used to hang out at a few bars that did that same thing.
You're kidding.
Including one of my favorite bars, the Empire Room. It closed, unfortunately, but it was like an old-fashioned kind of supper club, speakeasy kind of place. It was a great joint, and they would do that there. They would use the atomizer to spray the vermouth into drinks there.
Well, let me ask you something, because I usually drink Bombay.
Me too.
Is Bombay Sapphire much better than Bombay?
No, but it is slightly better in my drink, in my estimation. The difference is this is from memory, I can look this up, but
right.
If I remember correctly, the key difference between Bombay and Bombay Sapphire is that Bombay is infused with 8 herbs or botanicals, and then the Bombay Sapphire is infused with an additional 2 herbs and botanicals. So you get a little more flavor in that blue bottle because of the 2 additional herbs and botanicals. But they also, that same brand, that same company, also, I don't know if they still make it. I think they do. They were also putting out a something called Bombay Sapphire East, which had a slightly lower alcohol content than the Bombay Sapphire, and it had 2 additional herbs and botanicals. So from the Bombay to the Bombay Sapphire East was a very noticeable flavor difference. It was a very slight flavor difference from either the Bombay to the Bombay Sapphire or the Bombay Sapphire to the Bombay Sapphire East. But one day, maybe for New Year's Eve, maybe we'll do a taste test of the different types of Bombay gin.
That sounds great. How about I have a bottle of Bowles gin. It's a famous actor gave me. I couldn't afford this. Have you ever had that?
I have had it, and it's good. I like it. My preference still runs towards the Bombay Sapphire.
Okay. I just wanted to know. I was just curious. There's also a number 3 London gin that an English guy gave me. He said this is the martini. This is what is known for the best martinis in England, and it's a bottle that has a key, actually, like in the bottle.
Wow. Well, that sounds pretty cool. I would try that. I'll be honest. The only gin that I really enjoy, Rick, is Bombay Sapphire. Until I started drinking Bombay Sapphire, which I guess was about 16 years ago, I was a vodka drinker, and I still like vodka. And if Bombay Sapphire is not available, I'll get vodka. My favorite vodka is the Stoli Elite, but there are some other good types of vodka as well, Russian Standard and some others, Patinka. But about 16 years ago, I started drinking Bombay Sapphire, and now Bombay Sapphire is my go-to. If they don't have Bombay Sapphire, I'll go with Bombay. If they don't have that, I'll go with vodka because I find Bombay Sapphire so much better than all the.
Well, I don't
want to say better or worse. So much more to my tastes than the other types of gin.
I got to try that.
Yeah. Well, let me know what you think.
Now I want to have a martini at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, so do I. Believe me. At least you don't have to be on the air. You can go out and get a martini. But bars are still open for another 20 minutes, Rick. Thanks. 800-848-9222. Billy is on Long Island City or in Long Island City. Hello, Billy.
Hey, Frank. I haven't bartended in a lot of years, but I worked in Vegas. But my theory with the martini is that everything old becomes new again. Even with the mojito, I remember years ago, I used to mix it. But the mojito was a new drink, but it really wasn't. That was a famous drink with the mob guys in the casinos in Cuba before Castro came along. And the other thing, I don't watch TV. I never watched TV in my life, but you mentioned Mad Men, and I noticed people, I remember even years ago at the Cosmopolitan, everybody saw Sex in the City. I never saw the show.
Right.
But everybody was drinking those because of a TV show. And I guess the TV, and I want to say real quick, I admire what you said about radio. As far as everything all becomes new again, I wish you could do that with radio.
I'm trying. I'm trying, Billy.
Talk radio is the cool. But I was hanging out with a bunch of young people on the Upper East Side 2 weeks ago at a Studio 54 bar. You should check out this place. The guy that owns it was the head of security at Studio 54, and it's like all the memorabilia and everything.
What's the name of it? What's the name of it?
Oh, Ethel's on 2nd Avenue between 84th and 85th.
I will see. I don't know when I'm going to be up that way again, but I'll check it out. I'll try and check it out.
Yeah, the guy used to be the head of security, but he owns it. But anyway, you know Oscar Goodman?
Yeah.
When are you going to – I tell you, when I lived in Vegas, that guy, he was the lawyer. I got out there at the tail end. They already busted all those guys from – this was years before they made the movie Casino. But I was there out there at the tail end. I was in between the mob and when the corporate took over we started building all the big casinos. It became all corporate. I was like in between both of those times. But that guy, I would love to hear him on the radio.
Yeah, well, I've had him on several times before, and like I said, I'll invite him back again soon. Billy, thank you very much for the call. So Billy's theory, if I understand it, is as simple as everything old becomes new again. I'm not so sure, right? I mean, does that mean you think we're going to see a comeback for the Gin Ricky? I don't know. Or the Sidecar? I don't know. I feel like there's more to it. Or the Bee's Knees. Remember when that was a big drink? The Mary Pickford. Or the good old-fashioned highball. You ever go to a bar and hear anyone order a highball anymore? I don't. Does everything old become new again? I don't know. Carol is in New Jersey. Hello, Carol.
Hey there. I love Bombay Sapphire. I think it's great. But I'm actually a brandy drinker.
Oh, really? I'm not surprised.
Paul Masson and sometimes E&J, but I prefer Paul Masson. And I also wanted to mention something about the garbage. I never had a problem with garbage. I used to put out the black bags, and they used to take them. They used to come early, and recycling. I never had a problem with that either. They came and they picked it up early.
Well, that's good to know, Carol. I'm seriously thinking of experimenting with this. I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll see what happens. All right, 800-848-9222. This is The Other Side of Midnight. We'll take your calls in just a minute. 800-848-WABC. I'm Frank Morano. Straight ahead. I tell you who, Molly left, and I don't know who they're going to have as the permanent producer of this program. Certainly a number of very interesting candidates from what I hear. I think one of the people that I'd love to see considered as the new producer of this program is Charlie Sheen. And it's not just because I'm a fan of Charlie Sheen, and I think he's a talented actor and everything, and has an interesting sense of humor. But I'll tell you, I don't know who runs Charlie Sheen's Facebook page, but every day he is on there with a different interesting question that makes me think and go, huh? And then before I know it, I'm asking the same question that he's asking people to people in my social circle. And then I am, wondering what listeners would say about this. So such was the case with a question I came across recently on Charlie Sheen's Facebook page. I want to give proper credit where credit's due. And I'm going to ask you the same question that Charlie Sheen asked on his Facebook page. What's one thing you got in trouble for at school? And I'm going to give you my answer, but I want to hear yours. Doesn't matter whether we're talking grade school, junior high school, or high school. What's one thing that you got in trouble for at school? Tell me. 800-848-9222. That is the question.
A question. Since before your sun burned hot in space, and before your race was born, I have awaited a question.
Matt Blaze, let's hear your answer. Tell me one thing you got in trouble for in school.
In school, I got in trouble a lot for being late to school. In school for talking in class. I was a pretty good kid, actually. I didn't get in trouble a lot, but I do remember being in trouble for talking and being thrown out of the classroom. But I never got, I got in-house suspension, which means after school, like detention.
Detention.
So
Correct.
I had detention. And that was for being late to school.
Were you ever suspended?
No.
Okay. So, Philippe, how about you? Ever suspended, ever get detention?
Yeah, I was suspended before.
For what?
I got suspended 3 days into my high school career for slapping someone in the face with a turkey sandwich.
A turkey sandwich?
Yes.
Were they like?
It was my friend. It was a joke, but they took it as me trying to incite a food fight.
What kind of bread on that turkey sandwich?
It was white.
Was there mustard on it?
There was cheese, I remember, and turkey.
What kind of cheese?
That's a detail that slipped my mind.
Interesting. That would affect my determination of the length of the suspension, is what kind of cheese. All right, so I'd say I got detention in, I think, the 8th grade, and I think I got 8th grade detention for talking. It was at lunch, and it was we were being punished collectively. Was it 8th grade? No, it might have been 7th grade. 7th or 8th grade. So I got, junior high school. I got in detention for talking at lunch when we were being punished. The whole 7th or 8th grade, the whole grade was being punished, and we weren't allowed to talk. And I responded to a question, a quick question about a book. Somebody asked me, what book is that? And I responded. Then So that I got in trouble for that. It was one day. But I'll tell you, detention back then, after school detention, was real detention. You know what we did at that detention? And I don't know if kids do this today. And this was at a public school, IS 34. We ended up scraping all of the gum off of all of the lunchroom tables. So you know how kids stick gum and other stuff underneath the lunchroom tables? Another kid and me spent all of detention scraping this gum with a scraper off of the lunchroom tables. So that was detention. And then in the 7th grade, I got suspended for, this is very embarrassing. I've talked about this before, only in my confessional show, my first show back, where I talked about all the bad things I've ever done and all the bad things that were out there about me. In 7th grade, I got in trouble for biting another student. A student, I was in typing class, and a student had taken a piece of paper, and he was like giving me a hard time, and he was almost daring me to bite him. So I bit him. And it was not a severe bite, but it was enough of a bite. There was a decent mark left there, and I got suspended for that. I got 3 days for that, and a heap of trouble from my parents. You don't even want to know what that was like. That was rough. And then I think that was it. In high school, I got in trouble a couple times for fighting, but everybody, all those were, all right, shake hands and both of you say you're sorry and nothing happens to you. And then once I got in detention for arriving late, a teacher that I had, a very good teacher, was tired of me arriving late to school and gave me detention. So I'd be curious what your answer to that is. Tell me one thing that you got in trouble for in school. Extra points for creativity. 800-848-WABC. Mike is in New Jersey. Hello, Mike.
Good morning, Frank. Frank, it was in 1st grade, and my grandmother had purchased my brother and I this awesome set of crayons. It was really cool. So I'm sharing with a kid that sat in front of me, and they were on the chair in the aisle. And Sister Frances Imelda, she was this big Irish nun, old school. She had to leave the room for a minute. She said, "No one get out of their seat." So I stood up just to get the crayon back. She walked in the room, grabbed me by the collar, yelled at me, dragged me in across the hallway into the 2nd grade. And Mrs. Hosell, the 2nd grade teacher, she had this red wooden paddle with blue felt on it. I had to put my hands out. I got 2 smacks, one on each hand. I started crying in front of the 2nd graders, which were the big kids, and I had to sit in front of the room for the rest of the morning, and I cried for probably an hour. And then I settled down, and it was pretty cool because I got to see what was going on in the 2nd grade, and then at lunchtime on the playground, I was like a celebrity because everybody wanted to know what happened to me. And then I went back into my class in the afternoon, and it was all over. But it was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's the kind of thing that I don't know that you see much of these days. And, now that I'm thinking about this, when I was in the 5th grade, I always had a problem with homework and doing homework. Almost my whole scholastic career, from 1st grade to college. No, from 1st grade to graduate school, excuse me. I always had a problem with homework. And that's why it's important to instill these habits in young people early. Had I licked my homework problem early on, I might have been a better student later on, but I didn't and I wasn't. So in 5th grade, I did not do my homework. And my teacher, Mr. Vigiano, was furious. So he sent me to sit in a kindergarten class and do my homework there. So I had the indignity of needing to, you can imagine this as a 5th grader, of needing to go to a kindergarten class and politely ask the kindergarten teacher, could I stay in here and complete my homework? And I mean, it was just the most humiliating thing in the world. Being, how old are you in 5th grade? 10 years old? Or maybe 11, 10 or 11? And you're surrounded by 5- and 6-year-olds? And they're all asking, what are you doing here? It's incredibly humiliating. It was a very good punishment, I must say. Sean is in Park Ridge. Hello, Sean.
Hey, how's it going? I got a, kind of a comical story. There was a kid in my class who I was friends with, and he was, very overweight. And there was another kid that was, friends with him as well. And they were both in front of me at the end of school one day. And I told the skinnier kid, because he was kind of mocking him out about his weight. I said, hey, why don't you leave him alone? Just knock it off. And I kind of maybe said it one too many times. And I kind of ticked him off. And so what happened was he turned around and dropped his book bag. I totally was in shock because, I was pretty athletic and all that. And I just, it wasn't that I was afraid to fight, but I just wasn't expecting one. Before I knew it, there's a circle of kids all around us, and we're outside, on school property still. And I grabbed him. I didn't want to hurt him, but I threw him down on the ground, and I was on top of him, but I didn't really want to hurt him, so I let him up, and I figured I won. I could have done anything I wanted to you. And what does he do when he gets up? He punches me right in the nose.
Oh, boy.
And I have to tell you, right after that, a teacher came, and I was in the nurse's office, and this is kind of funny, but the nurse sees me, and she sees I'm crying my eyes out, and she goes, does your nose hurt that bad? Are you okay? And I said, it's not my nose. My father's going to kill me.
That's very funny,
all
Sean.
I could think about.
That's very funny. I like that a lot, actually. Thank you. 800-848-9222. Kevin is in New Jersey. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, Frank. Yeah, I actually got in trouble a lot in school, but I can remember one particular instance. It was in the 5th grade, and it was during the Iran hostage incident, and I showed up to school in a T-shirt. It was a Mickey Mouse T-shirt, giving the finger, and it said F Iran on it.
Oh, boy.
And needless to say, they weren't too happy about that.
You got in trouble just for wearing that T-shirt? Well, I mean, I guess you can't
Correct.
wear
I was
profanity.
in the 5th grade, and it said F Iran.
Yeah, I
so
guess you can't use that profanity. That's true.
They told me I had to go home and change, and come back. They told me to come back, but there was a little luncheonette across the street from school, and I was hungry. So once I walked out, I said, yeah, all right. I went across the street, and I got me a hamburger and fries and sat down and ate. And never went back to school that day.
Oh, boy. Well, I can imagine that that went over big, I would think. That's a good one. All right, F Iran. Okay.
Good morning, Frank.
So, Jimmy, tell me about the controversy that you were enveloped in yesterday. What happened?
It really wasn't a controversy. I think it was just a little bit of a mistake because I believe I was the 7th caller, the gentleman that answered the phone. That's what he told me. And then in a matter of 2 seconds, he hung up on me. So it was obviously a mistake. I tried calling back, and it was busy. Then I texted you and let you know about the problem, and you straightened it out.
Well, good. Hopefully that means that you're in store for a lucky day today. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Look, with the King Chuck Berry playing right before the game, I think maybe he'll give me some luck.
Let's hope so. By the way, if people didn't know that was Chuck Berry, or if they ever want to know what songs we're playing as bumper music, join the Facebook group. We post them in there after every show. Just search on Facebook, Morano Radio Fans and Haters. All right, the timer's going to begin after I ask the first question, and if you get the questions right, we're just going to move on to the next one so that we can answer as many of these as possible, all right?
Sounds good, Frank.
Okay. What color are stop signs?
Red.
What 1973 Supreme Court decision legalized abortion nationwide?
Roe Wade.
What's the name of the current pope?
Pope John Paul?
No. The current pope is Pope Francis.
Pope Francis, I knew that.
Well, all evidence to the contrary, Jimmy.
Yes, obviously, Frank. It's like what you tell people not to do is what I did. I got flustered.
I hear you. I've been there. I tried to play Beat Bernie, and I similarly choked in my first appearance. All right, Jimmy, I'm going to put you on hold. We're going to send you a consolation prize. Okay? Give Philippe your address. Okay?
Yes, I will. Frank, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You can't get flustered, guys. You can't get nervous. I know it's easier said than done, but that's really the key. These are easy questions. I never thought he would get that wrong because Jimmy's a well-informed guy. You could tell. He listens to this show.